Welcome back. You know that feeling when your team seems stuck on a treadmill, hitting the same walls and making the exact same mistakes project after project? It's incredibly frustrating, right? Well, today we're going to dive into a powerful framework designed to turn those recurring failures into your team's single greatest strength. Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to talk about the frustration loop. The problem we're all trying to escape. Then we'll introduce a framework for learning that will be our way out. We'll dig into the incredible power of asking why, explore two different kinds of debriefs, and wrap up with what might be the most important piece of all, why the culture you build is the key to making any of this actually stick. So let's just start right there. I want you to really think about your own team as we go through these next couple of examples. My guess is at least one of these is going to hit a little too close to home. First up, what I like to call organizational amnesia. It's that moment in a planning meeting when someone just goes, wait a second, didn't we have this exact same problem last year? All that hard-won experience, all those painful lessons learned, they just seem to evaporate, forcing you to solve the same puzzle all over again. Or how about this classic, the communication gap? A team lead gives what they feel are crystal clear instructions, but they walk in the next day and find the team has gone way, way beyond the scope, burning time, energy, and resources. The intention was great, for sure, but the execution was totally misaligned. And then there's this kind of mistake, where one bad call can have consequences that linger for months. A manager makes a bet that a warm November won't hurt jacket sales, and whoops, now the company's sitting on a mountain of unsold inventory. It's a single decision, but a very costly one. So look, the point here is that these aren't just one-off bad days. They're symptoms of a bigger issue, a system that isn't built to learn. Your team gets trapped in this vicious cycle where an error happens, which leads to blame, and that blame makes everyone afraid to talk honestly, which, you guessed it, guarantees the same errors will happen again. So, how in the world do we break out of that cycle? Well, the answer is a surprisingly simple, structured process. It's designed to take all that frustration and turn it into fuel for getting better. It's called a debrief. Now, let's be really clear about what this is. A debrief is not a witch hunt. It's not about pointing fingers and figuring out whose fault it was. It is a disciplined, blame-free investigation into what happened and why it happened, all for one reason, to make sure we do it better next time. It's a tool for learning, period, not for punishment. And the process itself follows a really clear roadmap. First, everyone agrees on exactly what event you're looking at. Step 2, you establish the objective, indisputable facts. Third, you pinpoint the gap between what you planned to happen and what actually happened. From there, you dig for the root cause, we'll get to that in a sec, and finally, you create real, concrete actions to take forward. To do this right, you have to make a fundamental mindset shift. You have to stop focusing on the outcome and start obsessing over the process. Why? Think about it. You can have a terrible process and just get lucky with a good outcome. And you can have a brilliant process that fails because of bad luck. The only thing you can actually control, and therefore the only thing you can reliably improve, is your process. That is where the learning lives. Okay, this next part, this is where the real magic happens. If you only take one single tool from this entire explainer, please make it this one. It's the simple but incredibly powerful practice of asking one little word, why. Okay, let's run through an example. A team gets sent overseas for a big job, but they land and realize they're missing critical parts. Total disaster. Now, on the surface, the problem is simple. An employee forgot something. But we can't stop there. We have to ask, why? Well, the employee says they followed the checklist they were given, and it turns out that checklist was totally out of date. It didn't even include the new parts. Okay, so we've peeled back a layer. The problem isn't just a forgetful person, it's a broken tool. But we're still not done. Why was that checklist out of date? And there it is. The real issue is that the organization has no system in place to take the lessons from one project and use them to update the tools for the next one. Do you see what happened? We went from blaming a single person to identifying a massive failure in the entire system. And that is the whole game. By asking why over and over, you move past the surface level symptoms and you find the root cause. And here's the beautiful part. When you fix the root cause, you don't just solve this one little problem. You basically vaccinate your whole organization against an entire class of future failures. All right, so now that we know how to hunt for the root cause, let's look at the two different levels we can apply this kind of thinking to.
Because the truly great teams, they don't just examine their systems, they have the courage to examine themselves.
The easiest way to think about it is this. A process debrief is about fixing the machine. It looks at the plan, the tools, the workflow. A personal debrief is about upgrading the operator. It looks inward at our own biases, our assumptions, our mindset. So going back to our example, fixing the checklist process is a huge step. But a personal debrief might be someone asking, why did I just assume the old checklist was good enough? You need both. You have to improve the system and improve the people inside of it. But here's the thing, and this is maybe the most important part of all. You can have the best 5-step debrief process in the world, but it is completely and utterly useless if people are too scared to tell the truth. That's why the final piece of this puzzle, the foundation for everything, is your culture. And what we're talking about here is something called psychological safety. It's not a complicated idea. It's simply the gut feeling that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up. It's the belief that you can admit a mistake, ask a dumb question, or challenge an idea without fear. Without that safety, you get silence. And when you have silence, learning is impossible. So here's the ultimate litmus test for your culture. Just think about that word why. In a culture of blame, when a manager asks, why did you do that? It lands like an accusation. It sounds like, whose fault is this? But in a culture of learning, that same exact question, why did you do that? Sounds like an invitation. It sounds like, hey, let's get curious and figure this out together. The word is the same. The culture behind it changes everything. And this, right here, is what we're all aiming for. The goal is to build teams where people's sense of self-worth isn't tied to being right all the time. It's about developing professionals who are so confident in their ability to grow that they see admitting a mistake not as a sign of weakness, but as the fastest, most direct path to getting better.
So I'll leave you with a direct question. I want you to think about that one frustrating thing, that one mistake that seems to pop up again and again on your team. You know the one I'm talking about. Now that you have this framework, what recurring failure will you choose for your very first debrief?